As great as the Rock and Sock connection was, my personal favorite tag team was Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie. So here to induct Mick Foley into the Hall of Fame, his good friend and WWE Hall of Famer himself, Terry Funk.
I've aspired to be a good man, and I'm going to tell you something, my inductee is a good man. That's right. My inductee is nuts, he's crazy, he's out of his ever-loving mind, but I love him like an ugly brother. I was wrestling him in Sapporo, Japan a few years back. There was a snowstorm. We were in a 5,000-seat arena. Only 300 people showed up. We were in the ring for instructions. And I said to him, "Damn, what a terrible, terrible crowd." And he said with that twinkle in his eye and that quirky smile, "Yeah, but Terry, look at all those empty chairs." I knew I was in for trouble. At the end of the match, there wasn't a chair left unturned. What about when he and The Undertaker got on top of the cage in a Hell in a Cell match? The Undertaker slammed him right through the top. I couldn't believe it. It was a 25-foot drop at a minimum. He hit the mat like a bliffet. That's 10 pounds of poop in a 5-pound sack. I thought to myself, he's dead. I ran to the ring to confirm it. I looked down at him. His eyes looked like a dead fish on the beach. And I said to myself, he's dead. I turned to the referee and I told the referee, he's dead. I turned back around, I guess, to give him his last rites. And as I did, The Undertaker grabbed me by the throat. He said, "He's not dead, you idiot. He's up." And he choke slammed me right out of my tennis shoes. That's a God-honest truth. The two of them finished the match, and this is a God's honest truth too. They carried me out. Who does the credit belong to in the world of wrestling? The credit belongs to our next inductee and others like him. He's a wrestler in the ring whose face is covered in blood, sweat, dust, and dirt. He's a wrestler that does his best, not only for himself, but for his opponent. And most of all for you, the fans, that have given up your hard-earned cash. He wants to give you something special, and he's going to make it just that. He gives it all to you, each and every time he steps into the ropes. At his best, he hears the roar of the crowd. At worst, he fails, and he frets, and he frets, and he frets some more, blaming only himself until he enters the ring once again. At that time, all of his aches and all of his pains are forgotten. All of the injuries that have been accumulated through the years are pushed to the back of his mind. For as the bell rings, he knows it's his performance that counts. I would like to introduce to you our next inductee into the WWE Hall of Fame, a great husband, a great father, a true humanitarian, the one and only, open the envelope. Open the envelope. You want me to open the envelope? That was Mr. Sacco. He wants me to open the envelope now. Well, we've got a four-way tie here. Come on down. Dude Love, Mankind, Cactus Jack, and my favorite, Mick Foley.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know this might seem like an unusual way to start a Hall of Fame acceptance speech, but I noticed that Hacksaw Jim Duggan, I'd like Hacksaw Jim Duggan to stand up just for a moment. Jim, just stay seated. I want everybody, the thousands of people in attendance. Jim, you're not done yet. Take a good look at Jim. Take a good look at me. We're not the same guy. So please stop saying, I know you, I love you, you're my favorite. Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So, but, from the bottom of my heart, it just fills me with joy to have the Bella Twins back in WWE. My 9-year-old doesn't care for that type of talk. He likes to reprimand me. Well, I love you too. Thank you very much. And I would like to answer the question that I know is on your mind, on the minds of so many people out here. Yes, it did hurt when The Undertaker threw me off the cell. Don't need to go through that again. I am like Bill Murray in a 15-year episode of Groundhog's Day, answering the same question over and over again. I don't know how I'm going to feel next year. Class of 2014, I'm going to feel bad for them because this is a difficult class to live up to. I have a feeling that in the annals of wrestling history, the 2013 Hall of Fame induction class will be like the 1927 Yankees. We will be the standard bearers against which all others are compared. For example, did you know that cumulatively, Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund, and I have held the WWE title for a total of 6,225 days. No, I don't think the fans need an individual breakdown. All right, I've got the numbers here. Bruno Sammartino held on to the WWE title for a combined total of 4,040 days. Bob Backlund held on to the WWE title for a combined total of 2,138 days. I held it for 47. Thank you. But as I mentioned to a one CM Punk several months ago, nobody cares about numbers in the end. It's the moments of greatness that go on to define who we are as performers and human beings. And I was fortunate to have been in this very building almost 30 years ago when I saw one of the true moments in our sport's greatness. I hitchhiked from my college in Cortland, New York, all the way to New York City because I had heard there was going to be a steel cage match pitting Jimmy Superfly Snuka, who was my absolute idol, against the magnificent Morocco. And I hoped and I thought that something special would take place that evening, and indeed it did. At the end of the match, Jimmy went to ascend to the top rope, which would have been great, and then he just gave a glance, like he just gave a little glance up to the top of the cage, and everyone knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Superfly was going to climb up to the top. To this day, it's still the most impressive sight I've ever seen in my life. Snuka 15 feet in the air, giving the I love you sign to the fans, the appropriate sign to give before crushing another human being. His body bathed in both blood and flashbulbs, and he took off, seeming like an endless flight. And when he crashed down, I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I looked around and I saw grown men hugging, weeping. I wasn't one of them, though. But I remember distinctly thinking that I wanted to do something that made people feel the way that I felt that night in October 1983 in Madison Square Garden. A couple of months later, a very romantic evening started in the most likely of ways when Rocky Johnson, father of a person you know as The Rock, and Tony Atlas won the tag team championships. I remember a wooden chair crashing hard over a Samoan head. And if you thought the evening couldn't get any more romantic from there, it actually did. I walked a lovely young lady home and held her hand as the snow drifted down silently around us. And I did tell a little bit of a lie in my book when I said there was a goodnight kiss. Perfect kiss, because actually the goodnight kiss did not exist. But I looked her in the eyes and I said, I had a wonderful time. Good night, Joanne. She said, I had a wonderful night too. Good night, Frank. And the emotional pain I felt could only be dealt with in one appropriate way. I knew I had to dive off of some type of high object. And so I put a teddy bear on the floor of room 317 in Fitzgerald Hall in Cortland, New York, where ironically, or maybe just coincidentally, my son is now a residence assistant at. Same dorm room, same college, he's the RA. And apparently, students are still making the pilgrimage to room 317 to see where that first Superfly leap imitation came up. And in those days, in order to film something, you either had to have a VHS recorder with a waist full, a belt full of backup batteries, so you looked like Batman with a utility belt, or you had to have what we had, which was an 8mm camera, which required the use of an enormous amount of wattage to illuminate the scene. And I'll go out on a limb here and I'll say that when that wattage illuminated my room, it drew a lot of attention, and it was for the first time females of Fitzgerald Hall were wandering down to 317. And I prepared myself by listening to the opening strains of a Blackfoot song, which I can't remember. Diary of a Working Man. At a certain point, Ricky Rattlesnake Medlock hits a high-pitched scream, and that's when I took off. But not before I secretively, which means surreptitiously, because I'm an author. But I want this to be educational, and deep down, because I want to win the approval of Damien Sandow. You see the ring in the photo? I have absolutely no idea what to do with this, because I have not worn jewelry since one of my front teeth, which I had formed into an earring, became no longer necessary when I lost the ear that it had been hanging from. But on that night in Cortland, trying to soothe my pain, I surreptitiously, before taking flight, took a bottle of red food coloring and I placed it in my mouth, and then I took off from that bed in Cortland, New York, and when I landed, I let that red food coloring mixture out with a splatter, and it hurt. It hurt bad, but I will never forget the shout of one lone female as she said, "That's the most disgusting thing I've seen in my life." And I knew right then that I had to get more of that somehow. That I needed reactions. If I could not impress a woman, surely I would find a way to discuss them. And set about achieving reactions throughout the next 30 years. So let's have a big round of applause for Jimmy Superfly Snuka. If we could. It would be almost impossible for me to list the names of every individual who helped me out along the way. I was so fortunate in that even when veteran wrestlers didn't particularly care for my style of wrestling, they seemed to care about me, and they saw that I loved the business, and they were always willing to give. And so I stand up here as a product of hard work and sweat and blood and determination, but also as a result of their friendship and the kind words they had for me and the helpful suggestions. But I did want to mention 3 or 4 individual people before we move on to some of the great moments that I have shared in this building. It's just coincidence that most of them took place with Triple H. It has nothing to do with job security whatsoever. That the amazing Triple H and I had so many great moments in this building. But my trainer is here, Dominic DeNucci, made the trip. Stand up, Dominic. 97 years old, ladies and gentlemen. He's 82. I remember one night watching Madison Square Garden Network when Stu Hart was introduced to the crowd, and they introduced him at like 97. And I remember the first time I met Brett, I was like, "Man, your dad looked so good for 97." He said, "It was a rib, Mick." You know, it was, my dad wasn't 97. Dominic met me when I was setting up rings outside of New York City, and I remember when he asked me to show him what I thought wrestling was, and so I reared back the way I just knew all wrestlers would, with a huge forearm, and I brought my foot way up in the air, and I stomped it on the ground as loud as I could without barely touching him, and looked at him like, "Yeah, that's what I do." And he said, "You think that's a rest?" He didn't say wrestling. "You think that's a rest?" And I went, well, yeah, isn't it? "You think that's a rest?" And he took me into the corner and he began pelting me with forearms to the upper torso. I don't recall his foot stomping the ground, but I do recall great exhaltations of breath leaving my body and my pectoral area being a little worse for the wear the next day. Dominic was tough on me, but he never abused me in any way. And to tell you what kind of man he is, when he told me it was time to talk about money, he said, "How much you think I should pay?" And I had heard that it was $100 a lesson, and I didn't have $100 to give him. So I went low. I went with 50. And Dominic looked at me, he shook his head, and I thought, "Oh no," and he said, "That's too much." He said, "You give me $25 a week." And after a year and a half of making the trek from Cortland to New York to Freedom, Pennsylvania, in that freezing little abandoned elementary school, Dominic said to me, he said, Mickey, you come here, you sleep in your car, you have a ball this big. Oh, it's the PG era, sorry about that. But he said, you don't have to pay anymore. And I've never heard that type of story before from anybody who trains people. And so, Dominic, I want to say I don't keep in touch with you enough, but in front of all these people, thank you. I love you. I wouldn't be here without everything you've done for me. The next one's going to seem like a strange call, but I wouldn't be here without Shane Douglas either. Yeah. Well, Shane and I were quite opposite in most ways, but together we made a pact to work as hard as we could and train and learn as best we could, and we learned the ropes, and I will never appreciate what he did for me. The next man on my list of 5 is Jim Ross. It was a tough decision. Trying to figure out who was going to induct me came down to 2 people. It came down to Terry Funk, and it came down to JR, because JR not only is the greatest announcer that our business has ever seen, and I know you'll fight me on that, JR, but I think I've heard them all. And you have an unparalleled gift for expressing emotions and telling stories and taking what is inside of you and getting it out to our WWE audience. It's simply amazing the things you did, especially when I was an aspiring wrestler and my one-loss record was not all that stellar. Some may point out that, Mick, I've seen your overall record, especially at WrestleMania, and it's not all that stellar. The Undertaker has a tremendous streak going. I've got one of my own. I haven't actually won a WrestleMania match since 1998. But it was what JR did behind the scenes that will leave me forever indebted to him. Apparently, there was this feeling among some important people that I didn't look like a star out there. That I looked somewhat, the word used was seedy. And JR went to war for me in a way that I don't believe he ever has for any talent, and almost put his job on the line. And I guess the compromise was made when Mr. McMahon more or less thought in his mind, all right, I'll bring him in, but I'm going to put a mask on him. Which turned out to be absolutely the best thing that could have happened to me. But there's one thing that's bothered me about JR's calls. I don't mean to dig up dirt here, air or dirty laundry, but 1998 in June, I had that little match known as Hell in a Cell, and JR had 2 of the most classic calls I've ever heard in any type of entertainment event. He said, God is my witness, he's been broken in half. And good God Almighty, somebody stop the damn match. Where we begin to have a problem is where JR used the phrase, look at him, he's smiling. I'm going to break that story right here, okay, JR? As Terry Funk made mention to, he was in the ring and he took a choke slam from The Undertaker, and in the course of doing so, his shoes came off his body. It was the only time in 15 years I'd ever been knocked out, just legitimately unconscious, to the point where if you actually go back and watch that match, you'll see me after about a minute roll over. And for you lip readers out there, what I'm saying is, where'd those shoes come from? It's the truth, man. Where'd they come from? And as I emerged from this fog of unconsciousness, I started to gain my bearings. I knocked The Undertaker off the top rope, and I sat down in the corner of the ring, and with part of one of my front teeth sticking out of my nose, JR said, look at him, he's smiling. Here's the truth. Even in the state I was in, I realized that that second fall through the cell, in which a steel chair had followed me down the entire length of the way, smashing into my face, causing significant damage to my already significantly damaged dental work, that I also had a large wound underneath my lip. And I thought to myself, you know, Mick, if you can find out a way to take your tongue, stick it through that wound, and wriggle it, it'll make for some pretty captivating television. Thank you. No one ever saw the tongue, and in fairness, JR, it did seem like I was smiling. And now the last person I'd like to mention, without whom none of this would have happened. I might be here on this very night, but I'd be out there watching it instead of up here being inducted. If anyone's ever said a bad word about this particular man, they say it in private, because I've never heard one, and the person in question is The Undertaker. Long before there was a Hell in a Cell, he put me on the map here, because he saw something in me. I'd known him from years before, and he'd followed my career. I remember, like, when I was elsewhere, actually running behind The Undertaker. At that time, they had a real hearse for him to drive from town to town in. And I'd known Undertaker since 1990. I'd known the late, great Paul Bearer since 1988, when he used to ask me to babysit his children so he and his wife could enjoy an evening out. And I'll say that I had that most fortunate of luck to have been in the right place at the right time with absolutely the right guy, and we achieved the perfect wrestling scenario where both guys benefit from having been in the ring together. Speaking of Paul Bearer, we had this custom every time we wrestled The Undertaker. I'd be out there in the ring first, and then that music would hit, and I'm going to look for guys who wrestled him, and they're probably going to nod in agreement, and Uncle Paul would, JBL, you've been there many times, Uncle Paul would raise up his sleeve and he'd show me that his hair was standing on end and he had goosebumps, and I would show him mine, and it was the most ominous feeling. And so I want him to know, and all of you to know, that never once did I take for granted how much his performances, his persona, his work ethic, have meant to not only me and so many of the people sitting here tonight, but the business in general. So I'll be like all of you. I'll be on the edge of my seat wondering if the streak continues. The Undertaker, legend, I guess it goes without saying that he'll be up here whenever he feels like it. And I'm going to give you an in-depth conversation. Cena, this is how close we are, The Undertaker and I, after he tore the house down last year at Mania, and he was hurting, you know, he was really hurting. I felt like I was the only man who could walk up to him and say what it was on everybody else's mind. I said, Undertaker, please, just promise me that you'll never start tweeting. There's just be something wrong in a world in which The Undertaker uses the phrase LOL. Dead men do not tweet, my friend. But this was the place. There's so many great moments. I had the debut of Cactus Jack here in 1997. Where I faced Triple H. The 2000 Royal Rumble, the street fight. Michael Cole's out here, and he's a huge Springsteen fan, and every time I run across drummer Max Weinberg, he tells me he was in the front row, and Triple H and I had that unbelievable battle all the way back in 2000. And then in 2008, I had my last great moment in this building. I was part of the Royal Rumble. And that is what's known as a smattering of applause. It's just, if you're not going to go all the way, don't do it at all right? Just embarrassing yourselves out there. I'd taken note of where my children would be sitting. It was the first time in many years, first match ever that my entire family had been in attendance for. And so I took note of where they were sitting, and I went out not knowing what to expect. And I tried to relive a great moment from Royal Rumble 2000 where Triple H and we were throwing some heavy punches. And I got so insulted because this huge eruption went out throughout the arena, and I thought, who has the audacity, which of these guys has the audacity to step on my big return moment and do some type of unbelievable move? Because the truth is, you can think of so many things in the shortest amount of time when action is taking place. And I'll give you an example. In 1994 in Munich, Germany, when I lost my ear, I knew that the back of an ear was comprised mostly of cartilage and was therefore not likely to bleed, but yet I saw a steady stream of blood pitter-pattering against the bright blue protective mats, and I immediately thought of how much the song, "Listen to the Rhythm of the Falling Rain," sounded like the Michael Hayes-penned theme song for Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Because one went, "Listen to the rhythm of the falling rain," and the other one went, "Loves his wife and kids and does the best he can. Ricky Steamboat the Dragon." And by the way, Michael, that's some ominous verbiage there, you know. And when you're at the ring, I go, I don't know, this guy loves his wife and kids, does the best he can. The strangest thing about that tremendous round of applause is there was nothing else going on of note in the ring, and even as Hunter and I were pelting each other with punches, I thought, this is for us. This reaction is for us. Like, it just didn't occur to me. Sometimes I forget the esteem that some of you hold me in, and forget that something I do could merit that type of reaction. It did, man. Well, I like you in a platonic way, too. But it was later in that same Royal Rumble match, Big Daddy V was sitting on my head while I was in the turnbuckle. I was unable to move. And so I thought I'd take the opportunity to scan the crowd and look for my children and see if they were enjoying themselves. And my family was sitting up about halfway there in the first section. And I look at my younger kids, Mickey and Huey, and they were giving Dad a little bit of this. They were booing their own father. And when I drove home, I was in quite a bit of pain, and I remember thinking, you know, this might be the last match I ever have, and I'll have to live with the fact that it ended with my own children booing me. And by the time I got back to Long Island, I thought, you know what? That's exactly the way I'd like my career to end. Thank you. But it has not been a career without regrets. I know some of you may not want to get this heavy, but I invited someone special, and it doesn't appear that he has made it here tonight. Has anyone seen Santa Claus here? I guess it's possible he couldn't find the building. The guy who makes it to 357 million homes in a single evening can't find the most famous arena in the world. I also have to live with the fact I never beat Chris Jericho. I used to have this habit, and even today, my daughter Noelle saw me. I had a different move. I was closing my eyes and shaking my head, and she was going, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm just working on my speech." But in the old days, my wife would see me in the gym, and yes, I did used to go to the gym. I didn't get much stronger, but I would think of a lot of cool things to say, and she would see me over there, my eyes closed, and my right arm would be shaking, and she'd come over and she'd grab me and say, "You're doing promos, aren't you?" And I say, "Yeah, I'm doing promos." And I stopped thinking about promos for the longest time, and I stopped thinking about great moments that I might be able to bring to the WWE Universe until last year at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. I grabbed Chris and I said, "Chris, can I talk to you about something some other time?" And what I was thinking during that Hall of Fame, I realized, I heard the rumor that we might be in New York City and hoped. I hoped. I didn't do anything to actively campaign to be up here as part of the class of 2013, but I hoped that I might be. And I just remember thinking to myself, I'd like to drop an elbow on Chris Jericho. And have some type of ceremonial referee come out and make the count and right that heinous wrong. And I figured he'd pull a Charlie Brown on me and roll out of the way, or kick out on one and make my finish look weak. One more I don't have any elbows left in me. I just want to say one thing to my wife. Yo, Adrian, I did it! I can't get any higher than that, so let me say that in a building filled with amazing memories for me, all of you, Chris, that was gutsy, my friend. And CM Punk, a kind gesture on the eve of WrestleMania, almost unthought of. Before I say goodbye, let me just say that it was CM Punk who took me in November of 2000 or late October, at a time when I had the least confidence in my own abilities that I'd ever had, and let me feed off the energy that he brings to the ring. And that resulted in one of the best and most emotional moments in my life. And I believe the Nature Boy is here somewhere. And I ended up having one of the greatest, probably the greatest match in my life at Backlash 2004 with a gentleman named Randy Orton. And it meant so much to me because I had my first match back in 4 years. I got to team up with The Rock. We reprised the Rock and Sock Connection. Very special in the build-up because I was asked how I'd feel about teaming up with The Rock. And I said, well, I heard The Rock would only come back if it was something really big. And they said, he considers this to be really big. And I went, really? I never knew he liked me that much. So he likes me. He really likes me. But I looked out in the ring and I saw the Nature Boy Ric Flair, one of the greatest to ever walk that aisle. And I saw Randy Orton on the cusp of greatness. And I saw the monster Batista, and I'm standing next to The Rock, and I could see The Rock is feeling it. And before I went to the ring, I stopped and I said a prayer. And I said, dear God, please don't let me suck out there. Not exactly reaching for the stars, is it? And I did not suck, but I left that match thinking that I had sold myself short and that you don't make it to this stage by simply not sucking. So the next month we created some history, and the fact that Randy Orton still counts that match in 2004 as his all-time favorite means a great deal to me. And then a couple of years ago, at a point when I long should have been retired, the Nature Boy Ric Flair let me see that good enough was simply not good enough, and he dragged one more moment of greatness out of this decrepit old body. So of all the moments that I've enjoyed, the special memories in this building, this one stands out as the greatest of them all. I know I say this in just about every town I go to. Can I mention that the American Dream hired me in 1991 and used me to the best of my abilities, and I thank him for that. I know I say this in every building in the country, and there are times when I go home, look myself in the mirror after saying words like, it's great to be right here in Des Moines, Iowa. It's tough, man. But without exaggeration, it was great to be right here in Madison Square Garden. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.
Santa! Santa! And I heard him exclaim, as he walked away, Merry Christmas to all, and have a nice day. Thank you so much.
Merry Christmas, everybody.